Welcome to Valley Viewpoint. I'm Roger Johnson. My guest is Adina Pearson. She's a registered dietitian, and I'm going to let you finish the rest of the title. An intuitive
eating counselor.
And I was intrigued when I heard that. First of all, I might even just say I met you at the gym.
Yep.
And sometimes your 6-year-old comes, and I became just enough acquainted with you to know that you are a dietitian. And for some reason, I like dietitians. I like to find out what they're advocating, what they're sensing from the community, and what is the passion that you might have as a dietitian. And I suppose there's specialties out there among dietitians. I'd like to even know how you chose this field. Give us an idea of how that worked.
The story can be very long, but let's see. So I took.
We got time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I took my first nutrition course ever here at Walla Walla College. So here in this valley, when I went to Walla Walla College back in the day when it was a college. And prior to that, I was a healthy person. I never had any concerns about food. I always grew up very thin, and so in my mind and the way the world worked, you know, thin people didn't need to worry about what they ate. It was just for people who were trying to lose weight. And so for me, I equated sort of like the messages I heard about junk food or fat or these kinds of things were about weight loss. And really even today, those messages tend to be put together in a lot of what we read and what we see.
I certainly have, yes.
Yeah. So taking a nutrition course kind of opened my eyes to what food can do and, you know, disease prevention and all of these things that we think of when we think of healthy eating and good nutrition. And at that point in my college career, I didn't really have a major. I may have been health science, I may have been occupational therapy, something like that. And as after that course, I became very interested in nutrition. And to some degree, I became overly interested in nutrition. So I think that for a lot of young people, college students, when they're in that stage of life where it matters what you look like and you're thinking about life very proactively and idealistically, you know, it's easy to latch onto something like nutrition and health and kind of become a little preoccupied with it. So I would say that that stage in my life, some of the food choices and eliminations I made and attempts to be super healthy and fit probably were on the spectrum of disordered eating without necessarily falling into a diagnosis. I was my mind, you know, was constantly thinking about my exercise routine and what I should eat and what I shouldn't eat. And I, you know, even in my journal, I would be writing about what I was eating and trying to get it just right. And it was kind of a problem I didn't know I had because I thought I was being healthy and my friends were kind of thinking of me as the healthy girl, the one that was fit and, you know, was always at the gym.
So the gym is not a new thing for you?
No, but it's very different now than it was then, definitely. So,
the gym itself is different?
Or myself in the gym.
Your approach?
My approach, yes, definitely.
I'd love to hear more.
So I became very interested in nutrition and fitness, and I thought I need to teach other people. I was very gung-ho and like evangelistic about it. And so when the recruiter from Loma Linda University came over here and I talked to him about the program, you know, that was it. I wanted to do nutrition and help people get healthy. So
yes, of course. I mean, that's what it's about. It gives you meaning.
Right, and it's a good thing to try to help people. But definitely my philosophy has changed a lot and my outlook toward health and eating has definitely changed over the years.
Well, you've presented a number of intriguing ways that we could go with this. I would very much like to know how that change has occurred and why. And for example, who was the first one that said, Adina, you're a bit too interested in this topic, you know, for your own good? Or was there a person that came in on the scene? Or
you know, there wasn't. Nobody really thought there was anything wrong. My
First
parents
of all, your teachers inspired you overly. I mean, apparently.
Right. Yeah, you know, they just cheered me on. And I didn't have anything diagnosable. You know, I was never necessarily unhealthy. I think it was just mentally not in the healthiest place with my focus. So there wasn't one person. It was probably partly my nutrition and dietetics career that kind of like broadened my picture of what's okay to eat and what's not okay to eat. And then over time, you know, my career and working with other people and reading more and more education, you know, in that realm, I think just slowly changed the way I looked at food and eating. Mm-hmm.
Then in your career as a professional,
Yeah.
you had the opportunity to meet possibly ones like Adina that became very enthusiastic.
Mm-hmm.
And was that part of the unpacking of the realization of where you were at? Obviously, there's that constant feedback between
Sure.
people. And so, again, how did this become aware of what is healthy and what is unhealthy?
Right. I think I had to learn more academically and more through continuing education to see that difference before I could spot it in my clients. So before, you know, anyone enthusiastic about nutrition, I was like, yes, you know, go all the way, do your best, you know, eat only the perfect foods. But I think it just had to come with maturity too. So just learning more, because as a registered dietitian, you have to complete so many hours of continuing education over certain time periods. And so through that, through reading, I think that changed my philosophy a little bit, and I was able to see when other people were maybe taking things too far or no longer in the healthy realm of healthy eating.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about this, but I'm assuming from looking at your bio that you came back from Loma Linda and then you came back to this valley.
I did,
And
yeah.
why?
Great question. Walla Walla sucks you back in.
Okay.
But
We
I
like
had so
that. I mean,
many,
it's a great place.
yeah, there's so many good memories from Walla Walla. So when I was first job hunting and I saw a position here at the old General Hospital, I thought, hey, why not? I'll apply. And I really wasn't thinking much about it. But it just sort of, you know, tumbled into a job, my first job at General Hospital. And that's how it all started.
And was that job quite open as far as the broad base of dietitian?
Yes, because
experience?
I was a hospital dietitian, but I also saw outpatients. So I saw the patients in the hospital and helped them with whatever special diet or dietary needs they needed. But I also worked with outpatients, so patients who came in from the outside to work on cholesterol or diabetes or things like that. I taught cooking classes, diabetes classes, you name it. And I probably worked with somebody that had that condition. So pretty broad, yes.
And then after what happened after the hospital
So
segment and
after,
phase in your life?
after my second child, you know, I toned down that phase in my life and worked in other capacities, local clinics and with other organizations. I taught classes with Blue Mountain Community College and I forget the name of the other department. I taught classes for migrant workers, parents, moms mostly, just about feeding families. And since then, I've done online classes for parents with other dietitians out of this area. So I like to dabble.
Well, since you brought up classes, Adina, you are known then as enjoying teaching, apparently, because you've been doing teaching, and you still have classes, I understand.
I do.
Talk to us about how people would get in touch with you as
Sure.
far as finding out what classes you might be offering.
Definitely. I offer individual consultations and group classes, and you can reach me at 509-295-2923, or you can email me at adina@adinapearson.com.
I noticed your email, Adina, and then at Adina Pearson.
Right.
So I mean, it makes it a bit easier, I suppose, but I hadn't seen that before.
Yeah.
But that is easy to communicate, Adina at Adina Pearson. And they can find out what classes you might be having in the near horizon and perhaps find out what their needs are, and you can maybe fit them in that area. And that's what I understand you are doing in a private office, is that too?
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Sure. This last fall, I started a private practice called Adina Pearson Nutrition, And I'm specializing in women with eating disorders and just the general struggles around eating that women might have.
Well, that leads us to talk about what now do you sense is a disorder? Why would a woman call you? First of all, some women don't recognize, like you were saying, we didn't recognize that perhaps they're on the edge of their habits of eating. How would you communicate in a broadcast sense, in a generic sense? What would you sense would be helpful?
So there's eating disorders that can be diagnosable and fit very tight criteria, you know, in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, DSM-5. And then there's sort of the spectrum of food struggles. So somebody might feel just out of control. They feel like, you know, they get home from work and then they can't stop eating. Or they might feel like a so-called emotional eater, somebody who turns to food to cope with difficult emotions, and that happens frequently. Somebody might think, well, I'm just an overeater, or I'm addicted to sugar, or I'm, you know, and other people might notice that, you know, food is taking up a lot of brain space in my head, and I feel like that's, you know, like I'm just so focused on it, and I just want to feel healthy around food. I want to feel that it's not so emotionally charged every bite I take.
And so the weight topic, is that generally, as you deal with women, the side effects of some of this emotional eating, they recognize that it's a bit of a toll for them as far as their body shape, their tone, and they're saying, I need some assistance, finally, they might say, or they're getting that feedback from others.
I think that a lot of women struggle with feeling comfortable in their body and feeling confident about how they look. And so a lot of women present with the concern that I need to lose weight. But usually behind that, there's bigger issues. Maybe they don't feel healthy, or they feel shame about themselves, or they just feel dissatisfied. And what they want is to feel good. What they want is to feel healthy. What they want is to feel confident in their body. And that can be approached, and that can be a goal to work toward, regardless of where weight ends up in the long run. Because we can work on healthy behaviors, and we can learn to take care of ourselves through activity and food in many different ways without necessarily using the scale as the measure of how we're doing.
We'll return to that after the break, Adina, and we'll be right back with Adina Pearson. Welcome back to Valley Viewpoint. I'm talking with Adina Pearson. She is a registered dietitian, and we're talking about intuitive eating. I'm still curious about that word, intuitive. Unpack that for us.
Thank you. So intuitive can come across in ways that it's not intended. So someone might think of an intuitive as a fortune teller or medium, and that's not what it means in this sense at all. But I've heard that misconception, so I wanted to lay that out.
Oh, sure.
Intuitive eating actually is based on a book written by 2 dietitians that actually has 10 specific principles involved. So, for example, the first principle is rejecting the diet mentality. So, you know, getting rid of those thoughts that tell us we must follow this rigid plan, or we have to always eat less than we're hungry for, or kind of the real rigid, restrictive kind of thinking that many people have in their minds. And then it involves things like listening to our hunger and being able to identify physical hunger versus other hungers or needs that are cropping up, or emotions, and being able to respect that, you know, God-given, although the book is not religious, but I would say, you know, God-given sense of needing food.
So that would be the second one that you're talking about?
I think. I'm not sure if I'm giving it in order at this point.
I'm not going to hold you to that.
Right.
But I'm just curious. I've heard the theory that if we don't have these phytonutrients or phytochemicals and not eating the whole foods, that that our body's trying to tell us something, but we're eating more thinking we're going to be satisfied, but we're not getting the right things.
So
you-
that's a possibility. I think our bodies are pretty intelligent.
The intuitive, letting
pretty
you know
intelligent. I think it's important to, kind of. So I guess one end would be being really rigid, following these rules about when you should eat, how much, like kind of externalizing with a cookie cutter. And then the other end is chaos. Who cares? Whatever, whenever I feel, decide to eat. And people tend to swing
Snack
between
culture,
the two.
anytime.
Sure. So people tend to swing between the two. They latch onto a diet, they follow it for a while. Diets fail us, long term. And so then we say, oh, forget it. So we swing to the other side where it's just chaos, no structure, no thought to it. It's just eating and nutrition is on the back burner entirely. And then people get tired there and they might not feel well, or suddenly something happens and they think, oh, well, let me try this new diet and swing over to this new restriction. And it just creates this pendulum swing. And where we want to be is in the middle, where it's okay to care about nutrition and to read and find out what's going on in the world of health. But it's also okay to be flexible and gentle with yourself and to consider your likes and find something sustainable that's in the middle.
And I basically interrupted you on the 2 or 3. We're not
Sure.
Get the numbers exactly right, of course. But what's another principle that
Another principle is respecting your fullness. So when I work with clients, we'll dive deep into the sensations of fullness. What does that mean? Some people are scared to be full, or some people tend to push past fullness for many reasons, and kind of really exploring that. There's coping with emotions without using food, and exploring that for people who have trouble in that area. Discover the satisfaction factor. So the importance of being kind and knowing that it's okay to enjoy food. And sometimes when we're afraid to enjoy food, we actually do worse in the long term. So those are some of them, and exploring nutrition in a gentle way rather than a rigid way, exploring exercise and based on how it makes us feel, and finding things that are enjoyable to do rather than, again, sort of a militaristic, rigid, I must do this in exactly this way.
And Adina, you have been there in the militaristic type of phase in your life?
Yes, definitely. It felt like I was doing the right thing, I'm so good. My sophomore year in college, I missed one day at the gym the whole year. Out of the weekdays that it was open. One day I would trudge through snow and ice and whatever, and I felt so proud. When it's easy to feel a lot of pride from that, and to feel like, you're slightly superior to all your friends who aren't at the gym, and look, you ate this, I'm stronger than you. I mean, there's that subtle pride in there, definitely.
I suppose, yes, and I could probably identify the idea that if I don't get to the gym every morning, and of course now the insurance company wants to know whether I'm at the gym for points.
Big Brother is watching.
So there's an incentive as
Sure.
well. So you have some of these factors of they'd rather have me at the gym than in the hospital for some reason. It's cheaper, apparently.
And it looks like you enjoy it, like you have fun when you go.
Well, I'm glad. Have you seen people at the gym that are not? Well, and of course, we sweat, and I tell people, somebody says you're sweating. Well, I said, well, that's what the gym is for, the appropriate place to really sweat. And so we haven't probably exhausted that list of 10, I know,
No.
but anytime you want to unpack some more of those principles. But when you sent me an email, and that there are some myths out there. Do you have some myths when I mention the word myth?
Yeah.
Do you have some that you'd like to share with our
Sure.
audience?
I mean, there's so many, because nutrition is so popular, and anyone can kind of claim to be an expert in this area. And with social media, it's just, everybody's an expert. And they spread a lot of misinformation and fear, right? There's a lot of fear about foods. Something as simple as GMOs, right? That can incite a lot of fear in people. And I won't touch that today, but I think it's too controversial right now. But myths about carbohydrates, such as, carbohydrates are fattening, carbohydrates are bad. More specifically, wheat, because of gluten, we should stay away from that. That's another myth. fat was
And when you
long.
say myth, for how many people have they done studies that a good science study, hopefully, that it passes the blind study? There are some that have intolerance to wheat?
Sure, and I can't give you a statistic off the top of my head, but not just intolerant, but people with a condition called celiac disease can't have wheat. Their body responds with an autoimmune response, so it attacks the gut when they ingest, something you can't even see, quantity of gluten. So that is an actual condition where the only treatment is abstaining completely from gluten. So it's not like you can have just a little bite of bread here and there, it's zero.
So that sensitivity, as the news spreads over the social media, and some people think, well, maybe I have that condition when they don't.
Right.
Is that some of the myth?
I don't know if they think they have that, but there's some books written lately, and I won't mention them to bring popularity to them, about gluten and how harmful it is for this or that, and how it's kind of like the bad thing of the decade. It causes all sorts of negative things and inflammation. And outside of celiac disease, there might be some people who have some sensitivity to gluten or some kind of intolerance, but that's still a very small percentage.
So in your client history as a professional, you really don't see that as a big factor in very many people's lives.
Right.
Any other myths that come? I invited you to share any passions that you want to share. What are
I'll
any
name
other
some. I think lately veganism is really popular, and I guess the myth around that would be like it's the only way to eat healthy, that you have to be completely plant-based to live a healthy life or avoid disease. And I think, looking across cultures and as far as statistics go, I don't think that really bears out. But if somebody's happy eating that way, that's okay.
Yes, as long as they don't come to you with malnourishment due to the
right.
And now when someone comes to you, do you give them for example, do you encourage them to have ways to find out whether there is some deficits in their health?
I don't necessarily have them do lab testing specific for deficits, but it probably depends on the case. So with eating disorders, I would maybe do things differently, different lab tests to check that their certain values are where they should be.
Talk some more about any passions as we complete the interview.
Soy gets a bad reputation, and there's a lot of things that people hear about it that's incorrect, such as soy is the same as estrogen, and it's just not. It contains a plant version of estrogen, but that estrogen, that phytoestrogen, in some ways acts similarly to human estrogen, in some ways it acts opposite, and in some ways it acts neutrally. So some of those scare things you hear really aren't true. It doesn't increase risk of breast cancer. It doesn't change men's hormones, and most of it is pretty much not an issue. The other one that's lately it's rising in popularity due to a new book is the myth that lectins are harmful. And lectins are a protein that is found in fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans and a few other things. And in very large quantity for an uncooked version of that food, like uncooked beans or uncooked flour, so raw somehow, but nobody eats it that way. It can be toxic and it can lead to GI symptoms, but in the amounts that are in foods that we eat, not an issue.
So a person that comes to you and says, I need help, I've got irritable bowel syndrome and that sort of thing, and they've read this book, am I reminding you of possibly some sort of issues that you've dealt with recently?
So I haven't had anyone bring that up, but I've been seeing it circulating. But irritable bowel syndrome can be complicated, and there are some foods that can be irritating to individuals, and sometimes it takes a specific elimination diet to kind of discover what those are. But it's important to really get to know the person to make sure there's not other underlying things.
I've really enjoyed meeting you, Adina, on this set. if someone wanted to talk to you, share your email and your phone number.
Sure. I would say go to my website, adinapearson.com, and you can contact me through that website, and you'll get to know kind of my practice philosophy and who I work with. My phone number is 509-295-2923.
And possibly classes with you as a teacher.
Possibly classes.
Thank you, Adina, for
Thanks.
joining us. Thank you for joining us on Valley View Point. I'm Roger Johnson.